Show your move. Good news, everyone. Don't you little diggy when you see onions have
Welcome to 20th Century Boy. My name is Rupert O'Murdoch, and this is the inside of my mind. G'day, guys. I Radio Mike here, the guy from the podcast that you're listening to right now. I think I've actually done Rupert O'Murdoch before. I'm getting weird deja vu. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. Every week I do a different RM themed name to open the show. I do think I've done Rupert O'Murdoch before, but this brings me back. I asked one of the hardcore fans of the show, and I know there's a few of you, to make a list of all the names I've ever done in the past. Have I done Rupert O'Murdoch? It feels vaguely familiar. But anyway, my name, of course, is Radio Mike. And this is my podcast, 20th Century Boy, the conversations you want to be having. Forget all those dull, boring conversations you have with your friends IRL. Because this is a podcast full of the conversations you wish you were having. Right? Welcome to the inside of my mind, the conversations you wish you were having right here on this podcast. Talking about all the stuff you want to be talking about, but you're not because your friends aren't into it. And that's why I made this podcast, I guess. My name is Radio Mike, young writer and producer from Melbourne, Australia, living his life, trying to figure out what to do next, as we all kind of are in some way or another. And I appreciate you being back. If you are a returning listener to this podcast, awesome stuff. Stick with it. We've got a lot to talk about today. I wanted to start up top here to plug, as always, the Patreon, patreon.com/radiomike, little as $1 a month. Bonus podcast. And you help support the show. The show only, at the moment I'm doing the show on Sundays, taking the day out of my weekend to do this show because I'm working full time. It does take a fair bit of time to put the podcast together. So all I ask is for $1 a month or $12 a year. I've made it. You can donate on Patreon, patreon.com/radiomike. Or if you want to just give me $12 as like a year subscription to Radio Mike Productions, paypal.me/itsradiomike. That'd be awesome too. Really helps the show running. A few people dropped off the Patreon in the last few weeks. Totally understand. I believe we also had a couple new people join up. So I will shout out to them here. Radio Joel and Radio Andy. Welcome to the radio family. Welcome to the Patreo family. Thank you so much. 43 patrons at the moment. And I really appreciate every dollar. It means the world. To everyone who dropped off, totally understand. If you can come back on in the future, even at $1 a month, you know, if 100 people give $1 a month, that's $100 a month, which goes a super long way. It costs money to make the podcast. And yeah, that's the only reason I'm getting people essentially to Patreon, because it really helps and you get a bonus podcast with me and Pat talking about other stuff. This week on the bonus podcast, me and Pat had planned to record it, but then it turned out Pat got locked out of his house. So I just dialed him in on the phone and we ended up talking to his mum about it. And it was really fun. So there's what you can look forward to over on the Patreon this week. As well as that, a couple other things, guys. I have this week launched the podcast Instagram. I realized there was one thing missing, and it is the podcast Instagram at TCBpod. Follow that. It's just where I'm going to post anything, because sometimes I post podcast-related stuff on my normal Instagram, and like I always lose heaps of followers, which is fine. I don't really care about that. But any more niche stuff that's really specifically targeted to this podcast, I'm going to put over on the Instagram at TCBpod. I would love to get a bunch of followers on that. And I've decided, here's what I've actually decided. There's 43 current Patreons. Whoever the 45th Patreon is, if you can also show me that you've followed TCBpod and you subscribe to the Patreon at the $4.50 tier or above, you get whoever's the 45th Patreon gets a free, it's a Can I Borrow a Feeling Simpsons t-shirt. It's size medium. you'll get a free shirt. I'll send it out to you. 45th Patreon, and you have to show that you have liked or followed the TCB Pod Patreon page. I would really appreciate it if we can get the followers up, because I want to start actually servicing it and making it like another channel or another avenue for the show. Of course, there's the Facebook group, facebook.com/group/20th Century Boy, and the Discord, which is like live group chat with a bunch of listeners of this show. But I did realize that there is a place here for the for a Instagram page, and I would love for people to get on that. So follow it now. There's a link in the description, but it's just TCB Pod. Jump on that. I'd love to chat to you there, and feel free to DM me on that or my normal Instagram, radio.mike. That would be so cool of you guys. So thank you so much. Of course, I've got to talk about a bunch of other stuff before we get into the meat of this podcast. I want to chat about The 100 with Andy Lee. TV show that will air every Tuesday. It aired yesterday at the time this comes out. That season 2 of The 100 has launched. Episode 1, it's 8:30 on Tuesday nights on Channel 9 here in Australia. If you are not in Australia, I'm sure if you have a VPN, you can go onto the 9 Now website and watch it. If not, I am positive there are other ways you can get it. These ways are pretty much what I would describe or have described in the past as Jack Sparrowing ways. But yeah, if you're in Australia, watch it live. I was the script writer on the show, and I was the researcher and developer for most of it. So all of the questions, it's a game show. A lot of the questions and the games that you will see on the show, I wrote. Sammy Garlep, who's been a guest over on Harry Potter and the Boys, my other podcast, has also written a bit on the show. So it's been a ton of fun. And I'm really proud of it. It's been, I think I talked about it on the first week back this year. It's been such a great creative step forward for me career-wise. And I've really, really loved it. It's been such a good experience. We are nearly finished the shoot. But yeah, there's 8 episodes. The first one has gone to air, but of course, every Tuesday, new episodes will air. Please tune in, share it around. I'd love for you to. It's a great show to watch with your family and friends in the same room. You play along with it, you know, play along, play the games, guess the stats that come up. It is actually a really fun one to play alongside your friends at home. So that has been just the most incredible career step forward for me. I've loved every second of it, and I can't wait. I hope you guys watch it. Yeah, a lot of the writing was me, a lot of it was Sammy, and I'm really, really proud of it. So I just wanted to give that a plug as well. I've also noticed that Radio Harrison, some of you may remember, is the MDF manager of the show. If you are new to the show, all you really need to know about this show is that the first rule of the show is don't block the MDF. If you don't know what that means, you're going to have to catch up to the podcast. You're going to have to go back and listen to all of it. But don't block the MDF is the only real piece of advice you need on this show. Radio MDF manager, Harrison, he has been... I got a bunch of don't block the MDF stickers printed at the end of last year. I gave a few to Harrison, and he's been putting them around random spots in Melbourne. So I'm also going to do this. I'm going to start putting don't block the MDF stickers in random parts of Melbourne. And if you see one, take a photo of it, send it to me. You know, I know a lot of listeners are Melbourne based. When I go to Sydney in a couple weeks, I'll also put one up somewhere in the Sydney CBD. I'm going to be staying in Woolloomooloo. I might put one up around there. So look out for them. And please go to radiomike.com.au/merch and buy one. I want to spread the word. Don't block the MDF. Buy an MDF sticker. Stick it up somewhere in your hometown. Wherever you are in the world, I know there's lots of international listeners as well. Get yourself a Don't Block the MDF sticker and put it somewhere in your area. I want everyone in the world to be going, what are these Don't Block the MDF stickers? What does this mean? I want everyone in Melbourne talking about it. So if you're in Melbourne, buy a Don't Block the MDF sticker. They're $5 and put it up somewhere. I want everyone in Melbourne not getting it, and only we get it. Only this podcast listenership gets it. And then I want it to be picked up by news.com.au or Pedestrian TV, and they do an article that's like, what's with those Don't Block the MDF stickers all around Melbourne? We did some digging. That's what I want to happen. It probably won't happen, but that's what I want to happen. Help me make it happen. Don't Block the MDF is a very important cause. I want to see that happening because Radio MDF manager Harrison can't do it alone. Wherever you are in the world, buy a Don't Block the MDF sticker and put it up somewhere in Melbourne. Guys, the other thing I want to make a stand on now is on the first step of this podcast back for the year, I talked about Wordle and how it's very vain to share Wordle. What's happened now is everyone in the podcast Discord, again, the group chat, there's about 200 people in there. Jump in, send me a DM, I'll let you in, is posting their Wordle. No more of this, please. I've officially had enough of it, and I'm putting my foot down now. No more Wordle. No more sharing your Wordles. Aside from that, life has been really busy for me at the moment, but I'm feeling really good. I'm feeling really positive. I've been running pretty much every day or at least every other day. I'm on Strava now. My running is pretty pathetic distance-wise and pace-wise, but if you want to look me up on Strava and follow me, feel free to do so. Just trying to get back into my fitness. I realized last year with lockdown and a breakup, I just totally lost track of any good habits. And I've talked about this a lot on this podcast, so I probably sound like a broken record, but yeah, I am just trying to get fit. And I actually think, I reckon if you look at videos from this time, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, if you're a YouTube viewer, I reckon I look a little bit fitter. So that's pretty good. I've been tracking my progress. I've been, changing up my diet habits. So yeah, I'm feeling really good in that regard. And I find Strava is a really good way to keep yourself accountable because you know that other people are seeing your exercise, and you can also give people kudos for their runs and exercise, which is also really fun. So yeah, it'd be great. It'd be great to see you on Strava if you're on it. I'd love to get you on there. So that's it. I did get to go to actually before I tell that story, let's start how we usually start, and we're 12 minutes in, so we're not really starting at the moment. But let's do this.
Trivia question of the week.
Great opener for trivia question of the week. Last week's trivia question of the week was a bit of an easier one, I thought. And you can always call into the show, 1-800-438-353. I feel like we need a reminder of that too.
If you've got a contribution to the podcast, there's only one number you see. Go 1-800-438-353.
1-800-438-353 to answer the trivia question of the week, or just to say anything. This week, the correct answer comes in from Radio Cusbro. The question was, in J.R.R. Tolkien's book, The Hobbit, which Hobbit does the title of the book refer to? And of course, the correct answer, Cusbro, if you don't mind.
Hey Radio Mike and Radio Family, it's Cusbro here, just letting you know the trivia question of the week was, the answer to it was Bilbo Baggins. Oh my gosh, what an easy one, Mike. Give us something harder next week. Come on, bro. Cusbro out.
I love how Cusbro just has his own sign-off where he says Cusbro out. This reminded me, when I answer the phone on a work call, I always answer it with, go for Mikey. Which is so lame, but I love it. People don't really know how to react. Trivia question for this week. Delving into the sports territory theme-wise, which is very rare for me, as long-term listeners will know. But the trivia question of the week, and call in 1-800-438-353. The Australian Open ended recently. So here's a question for you about tennis. Which tennis player has won the most Grand Slams? Which tennis player has won the most Grand Slams? 1-800-438-353. Win the trivia question of the week. Leave me a voicemail. Can't wait to hear from you. And of course, get in touch anytime with the show. Radio Axe, new listener of the show, has done just that. It was great to hear this message from you, Radio Axe.
Hey, Mike. It's Radio Axe here. I've just discovered your podcast last month, and
Awesome.
I made it to episode 47.
Mm-hmm.
I've been listening from the beginning and just thought I'd reach out and let you know happy birthday, just like you told me to say on the podcast. I'll be getting through to the latest one as quick as I can, and once I've caught up, maybe I'll have to have a chat with you. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you for listening, Radio Axe. Guys, would really love to hear from all of you over on the call line there, or get in touch, of course, anywhere. Radio.Mike on Insta or TCB Pod on Insta now. Feel free to get in touch there. As well as that, the Facebook group, Discord, and It's Radio Mike on Twitter. Please follow me because I need more followers on that because my old one got deleted. So now I have to I used to have like 1,000 followers. Now I've got like 150. So would love a few more followers over there. Guys, there's one thing I was talking about on last week's episode which caused quite a stir. But I'm ready to do this. Radio Mike's Lord of the Rings update. But isn't he like only into Harry Potter? No. I really like that opener. The Lord of the Rings update. Last week on the show, I dropped a bombshell. I've never seen any of the Lord of the Rings movies. People really didn't like this, particularly because I think people were genuinely just surprised about this. For example, got this Instagram DM from Radio Carly. Welcome to the Radio Family, Radio Carly. It's baffling me you've never seen Lord of the Rings. You're such a movie buff. You would genuinely love it. The movies are easier to digest than the books. Faces instead of names that are very similar. Well, for me anyway, visually easier. Yeah, there's a lot of characters with similar names in the book. Like Sauron is the Voldemort of the book, and then there's Saruman, who is like an evil wizard that's friends with Gandalf, or is he? But I am happy to announce, guys, I finished the first Lord of the Rings book. Really enjoyed it. Again, don't take back my comments from last week about it being really, really dense and difficult to read, but the story is great. And last night, Saturday, I watched the extended cut of The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, directed by Peter Jackson. And a little bit more on that in a sec. I did want to give a few other little bits of feedback. First of all, a lot of people were asking me, I mentioned that I'm listening to them on audiobook, but not the official audiobook, a fan-made audiobook that uses like the movie scores and sound effects and soundscaping. People ask me what's that called because they want to do it. It's a fan audiobook by a guy called Phil Dragash. So if you want to go on to any Jack Sparrow type websites and type in Phil Dragash Lord of the Rings, that's kind of how I got it into my hands, or into my ears rather. But yeah, that's what that is. I should also say I am about, according to my Kindle, I'm 25% through the book The Two Towers, which is the second Lord of the Rings. So I've gotten basically to the part where, for those who follow along with the books or movies, Merry and Pippin meet Treebeard, the walking, talking tree, and they're going to Isengard with all the trees. So that was cool. Still really enjoying it. A bunch of feedback as well. Radio Maddie over on Instagram, and welcome to the RF, Radio Maddie. I read these and watched the movies for the first time during lockdown. Why are there so many songs? And who the F is Tom Bombadil? In the books, there's a character called Tom Bombadil who's in it for like 2 chapters and then never appears again in the book. And he's supposed to be like an all-powerful guardian of Middle-earth or some shit like that. Didn't really understand that. He's not in the movies either. Radio Squirduck. The descriptions in the book are so over the top, which makes for great world building, but it's hard to follow as just a casual read. Completely agree. Without the movies, I think you'd have to read it 2 or 3 times to fully comprehend what's going on. Radio Declan, he simply just messaged me and said, "You've never seen a Lord of the Rings movie? What the fuck?" Radio Joseph wrote in, sorry. I thought he was saying happy birthday because he's written HP. He says, Harry Potter books, Lord of the Rings movies. That's my pick. The way the storytelling is translated to film is beautiful for Lord of the Rings, but the Harry Potter books are just that much more close-knit of a world, which allows readers to connect that little bit easier. I suppose the main difference is Harry Potter was written for a modern audience, and the Lord of the Ring movies were for a modern audience too. Probably why it has a larger following amongst our generation. Radio John said, Mike, we share a love of Blink-182, but on this subject, I must strongly disagree. He thinks Lord of the Rings is better than Harry Potter. Lots and lots of feedback. Also got one, and just so people know, I don't edit the TikTok and Instagram reel videos. Pat, our producer, does. Someone wrote in saying, at least, because I was talking about how the Lord of the Rings books were really bad and way too dense, and someone said, at least Tolkien can spell, because the video was littered with spelling errors, which most of them are. That's on Pat. Pat's in a bit of trouble. Moving forward, I think we're going to try and spell words right, Pat, because you spell so many words wrong. It seems to be a thing with TikTok editors that many words are spelt wrong. Pat, I have decided to deduct 1 cent from your pay for every spelling mistake I see. 1 cent for every spelling mistake moving forward, because that comment about at least Tolkien can spell really, really hurt my feelings. Pat, I'm just joking, by the way, if you're listening to this, but I will deduct 1 cent from your pay for every spelling mistake. So what are my thoughts on this? Well, I loved the movie. It was long. Funnily enough, it was when I was at 3.5 hours into the extended cut, it said it still had 27 minutes left. But then the movie ended and I realized that there's 27 minutes of credits in this movie. The credits to this movie, The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, goes for 27 minutes. I was sitting there like, because I've read the book, I was sitting there seeing that there was an hour left, but they were like pretty much at the end of the book. And I was like, how are they going to get another hour out of this? Makes sense when there's 27 minutes worth of credits. But I really, really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was very faithful to the book, and it also helped me kind of visualize what was happening in the book a little bit better. I thought all the stuff with Bilbo Baggins' birthday was really good. Gandalf as a character, I always thought Gandalf was really similar to Dumbledore, but they're actually quite different. Gandalf is like, you know, a little bit more fiery and angry and like aggressive than what Dumbledore ever was. But I really liked his characterization in Ian McKellen. I thought the perspective with the hobbits all being really small was really well done. It holds up pretty well, like reasonably well CGI-wise from 2001. I think that was also really good. I think the Balrog scene over the fire pit was great. That played out exactly how I imagined it when I was reading the book. This quote from Gandalf, I think, is incredible.
Fly, you fools.
I just love fly, you fools. And of course, Gandalf dying there, spoiler alert, but it's been out for 20 years and the book's been out for like 80. But I really enjoyed it. Really well made, epic fantasy, so faithful to the book. Really cleared a lot up, and I genuinely enjoyed it and can't wait to keep reading Two Towers and then watching the movie and then Return of the King, and then I'll go back and read The Hobbit and watch the Hobbit movies as well. So really excited about my newfound interest in Lord of the Rings, and I hope people are excited about following it along with me. Of course, there was another book reading challenge on the show, which was the Dav Pilkey book reading challenge. I am still going to try and read all the Dav Pilkey books, so that hasn't gone away. Another opinion in the Discord from Radio Whitey. Welcome to the RF Radio Whitey. He's a bit of a contrarian here. He says, I've fallen asleep during all 3 of the Lord of the Rings movies and I couldn't finish the first book because it was so boring. Tolkien is arguably the best world builder in history. He built the absolute foundations of modern fantasy and is responsible for almost everything we have today in that genre, but he's a bad storyteller. I wrote that before hearing Mike's take. 100% agree with him. Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's a bad storyteller and his world building is great. But yeah, for me, it was just, yeah, Harry Potter is so much more to the point. And lots of people did point out in the comments, which I did say in the podcast last week, Harry Potter is a kid's book. Its demographic is kids, but it holds up for adult audiences. There are a lot of parallels, though, in terms of Tolkien building the foundations of modern fantasy. Like, The Ring feels very much like what the Deathly Hallows or Horcruxes kind of are all about. There's lots of parallels there, that Sauron's spirit still exists in the ring the same way Voldemort's spirit still exists through the Horcruxes. Like, I think I don't know this. I'm sure she's answered it, but I'm almost certain J.K. Rowling would have read The Lord of the Rings at some point, and it would have inspired her. But yeah, I'm not 100% sure on that. Hey everyone, quick interruption from the podcast to remind you that this podcast, 20th Century Boy, is currently sponsored by Manscaped. Manscaped.com, use code RadioMike at the checkout for 20% off your next purchase. And Manscaped is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. If you want to tidy up your downstairs region, do a bit of manscaping downstairs. Hey, we're talking about shaving your pubes and shaving your balls. Manscaped's Lawnmower 4.0 is a fantastic product. Reduces the risks of ingrown hairs. You know how annoying and painful they can be. Little nicks and scabs that shaving with regular razors cause, it reduces the risk of those as well. It is very comfortable, very easy shave. Take care of yourself downstairs, guys. It is really, really, I think, the bare minimum you can do down there is to groom yourself. I think, the opposite sex often really likes a groomed man. And girls, it's not just for guys. You can use it too. I know it has Manscaped in the titles, but it works perfectly well on the female genitalia as it does on the male. Guys, let's be real. Be more attractive. Use the Manscaped Lawnmower 4.0. It's as simple as that. It helps you be more attractive. If you're going on some dates, I know a lot of people who listen to this podcast, you're young, you're at uni, you're in your early to mid 20s, you're going out with people, you're going out with girls, you're going out with boys, you're going out with whoever you're going out with, whoever you like to go out with, and maybe you have a few drinks. Maybe you end up going back to someone's house for some sexy time. Don't have some sexy time with a huge, dirty penis bush all over your penis and your balls or your vagina or whatever you have down there. Use the Lawnmower 4.0 to be more attractive. Just shave it all up, right? Get rid of it. Clean it up. Neaten it up. So if someone wants to do, a little bit of mouth stuff, little bit of whatever stuff, it's easier for them. They can enjoy it more. It enhances pleasure. It makes you more attractive. It enhances everything. 20% off your next purchase at manscaped.com using code RadioMike. No spaces, just RadioMike. 20% off. Guys, they've got so much. Weed whacker as well for your nose hairs and any ear hairs as well if you find them getting a bit out of control. I know I get nose hairs a lot, so I like to use that to just get rid of them. Give me nice, clean nostrils. Listen to that. That's a clean breathe in. No hairs getting in the way of that breathe in there thanks to the Weed Whacker. And of course, all their other products such as the Tool Shed, which I'm about to go interstate to Sydney. I'm going to bring all my Manscaped products in the Tool Shed, which is a carry bag, a travel bag for all your toiletries. Going to put my Lawnmower 4.0 in, my Weed Whacker, and a bunch of other stuff in there as well. You can pick all that up. 20% off manscaped.com, code RadioMike at the checkout. 20% off. Support the brands that support the show. Manscaped is doing heaps to support me and support this show and keep the lights on here at Radio Mike Productions. So if you like the show, give back to them. 20% off, code Radio Mike. Be more attractive. Let's get back to the show. What I did think about after this though, and I made a list over on Letterboxd. Follow me on Letterboxd, Radio Mike on Letterboxd. I made a list of ranking movies that are based on books that I've read. So I'm not just doing any movie based on a book. It's just like I have to have read the book. And I've only watched, 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24. So 27 books I've read, I've watched the movie of, I think, as far as I can remember. And I wanted to talk through them now, working backwards from the lowest rated ones to the top. So the lowest rated 2 movies that I've seen that are based on books are The Chronicles of Narnia, Prince Caspian, and The Chronicles of Narnia, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. Have read the books, and I've said, I think the Narnia books are pretty average. I think Lion, Witch, and Wardrobe is pretty good, but the rest are pretty average from what I've read. And I thought the movies, particularly Prince Caspian, was like nearly a 3-hour movie. And they're very much kids' movies. Kids' movies shouldn't be like pushing 2 hours, let alone pushing 3 hours. Voyage of the Dawn Treader was a little bit better, pushing 2 hours, but I guess just a little bit better, but still not very good. Following that from the bottom, and I have read the book of this, you might be surprised, The Neverending Story. Now, what I will say is the movie of the Neverending Story is way better than the book. The Neverending Story book is one of the worst books I've ever read in my life. Only the first half of the book follows the movie. Then there's a whole other half of the book that is awful. Because Bastian, the main character, the whole storyline is he starts like losing his memories and he turns into essentially a dickhead. And funnily enough, it's not fun reading a book where the main character is a huge dickhead. Who would have thought? So I think the movie's better than the book, but I still don't think the movie's very good. Moving ahead, Carrie, the movie with Chloe Grace Moretz from 2013, based on the Stephen King novel of the same name. I have read Carrie the book. I don't particularly enjoy Stephen King's writing style, and I thought the movie was like pretty average. Like it was fine, but not amazing. I think the book kind of gave it a little bit more darkness than what the movie was able to do. But overall, I enjoy the story of like girl who has superpower, like telekinetic powers and uses them for evil. I like that story. Movies. Next one is Ready Player One. Incredible book. If you haven't read it and you like this podcast, you'll probably like Ready Player One. It's just like a sci-fi dystopian future novel that has heaps of pop culture references. It's very much a nostalgia baiting book. The movie, though, one of the worst movies I have ever seen in my life. Hated it so much. Thought it was so bad and such a long and terrible adaptation of the book that was so good. So I was so disappointed. Following that, The Invisible Man, based on the movie that came out in 2020, The Invisible Man, which stars Elizabeth Moss, was a pretty good horror film that's loosely based on the book, like very, very loosely based on the book. The book is pretty enjoyable. It's more comedic than anything else, and it's like a sci-fi. I think it's by H.G. Wells, who wrote The Time Machine as well, which was the book that coined the name Time Machine. Invisible Man movie, followed by, next up, The Bridge to Terabithia, a book I read in year 8 English. I watched this movie a very long time ago, but yeah, Bridge to Terabithia, about the two kids who go to the magic world that they've made up called Terabithia, which was actually directed by Gaber Chuspo, who was the creator of the Rugrats. I just found that out. Next is A Series of Unfortunate Events, the movie with Jim Carrey. Decent movie. The books I enjoyed a little bit, but they slowly got worse and worse as they went on. I've read the entire series. The movie is based only on the first 3 books of that series, but also there was a Netflix series with Neil Patrick Harris as Count Olaf that came out sort of recently, and I really enjoyed that. I thought that was a great adaptation, but I did think Jim Carrey played a really good Count Olaf. Next is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I've read the book. It's very funny. I haven't seen the movie for a while, but I remember it being really good. It's also the inspiration because in the book there's Marvin the Paranoid Android, and of course there is the Radiohead song Paranoid Android from the album OK Computer that is very, very popular, and that's originates from that movie. Ender's Game next, which is a science fiction book about a bunch of kids who learn how to play a sport, but they're actually being trained as soldiers by the government. Spoiler alert, Ender's Game is a really good book. The movie is pretty average. Harrison Ford's in it, but yeah, overall it's a super average movie. Then I've got Captain Underpants, the DreamWorks adaptation of Captain Underpants. I was disappointed in this as a Captain Underpants fan, but I thought it was pretty fun as a movie. Then The Golden Compass, which is the movie adaptation of Northern Lights, the Philip Pullman book, which is a trilogy, the His Dark Materials trilogy. Incredible book, some of the best fantasy books I've ever read, but there is I think it's a HBO TV series based on that is much more fleshed out than the Golden Compass movie from 2007, and the series is way, way better. But those books are amazing if you're into fantasy. Incredible, incredible. Then I've got The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe movie, which I remember as a kid being a really, really good movie. There was a lot of fun. Bloody Edmund betraying them. Fuck him. Great Gatsby, the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, Tobey Maguire. That was a really, really good movie with an incredible soundtrack by Lana Del Rey back in the day. I thought that was good. The book I did in like year 10 literature at school and didn't enjoy too much. But yeah, I remember The Great Gatsby being good. Stardust, the movie, came out in 2007. High fantasy. Read the book as well. It's by Neil Gaiman. One of the worst books I've ever read as well. Terrible, terrible book. But then I watched the movie and actually really enjoyed it. I thought the movie adapted like the book so much better than the writing of the book was so dense. The movie was so much more bright and like, so I don't know. I hated the book. Then The Giver movie, one of my favorite books of all time, did it at year 8 in English. I think it's a fantastic young adult novel that explores lots of really dense and, you know, and confronting themes. The movie was pretty good. Like, they really Hollywooded the story a bit, but I actually did enjoy the movie, maybe because I enjoy the book so much, but highly recommend that book if you've never read it. Then I go to Big Fish. I thought the movie of Big Fish was really, really good. Tim Burton directed it. Amazing. The book was pretty crap. I think the movie was a better version. Then I basically go Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Goblet of Fire, Order of the Phoenix, Deathly Hallows Part 1, Philosopher's Stone, Deathly Hallows Part 2, Half-Blood Prince. Then we go to Holes, the 2003 movie with Shia LaBeouf, or however the fuck you say that dude's name. Incredible adaptation of an amazing book. If you've not seen Holes the movie, go and watch it. It is a fantastic movie, and the book is a great book. You could read it in a day. It really holds up. A lot of Harry Potter and the Boys stuff was really influenced by what I learnt from reading Holes as a kid. I did it in year 7 at school. Then, second up is the movie Lion, which is based on the book A Long Way Home, which is a true story. I've talked about it on the podcast before. The movie Lion, one of my favorite movies of all time. And then number 1 is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Amazing movie, amazing book. Those are all the books I've ever read that are based on books. Sorry, those are all the movies I've ever seen that are based on books. Write in other book movies that you've seen and read the book and what you thought of them and how they were adapted. Oh, I realize I have to add The Lord of the Rings to this list now because I've obviously read the book and watched the movie. So that's an update I will have to make. I would love to hear more of these books adapted into movies. What are the best ones? What do you think? Because I really want to read the Battle Royale book, which is that Japanese film that's basically like the Hunger Games on steroids that was based on a Japanese book as well. So yeah, that's kind of where I am. All right, couple more things before we go today. Please write in radiomikepod@gmail.com for anything you've heard that you want to talk about. Over the weekend, I put up a video about the Joe Rogan controversy with Spotify. If you're not aware, there's a lot of controversy around him, but predominantly it's the current one is that he is spreading COVID misinformation on his podcast, which is one of the most influential podcasts in the world, and probably the most listened to and most valuable podcast in the world, that is owned by Spotify at the moment. It was bought by Spotify for about $150 million, I think, last year, and it is exclusive to Spotify now. And Spotify's under a lot of heat because of the kinds of content that Joe Rogan puts out. And I spoke about this at length in a 17-minute video that's also available over on the Lovable Nerd feed. But I wanted to talk about it here. Neil Young, the musician, has taken his music off Spotify. I know what you're thinking. Who the hell is Neil Young? I was thinking that too. No idea who he is. But I've kind of done a bit more thinking than that since that video, so I wanted to talk a little bit more about it here. Predominantly in the sense that a lot of discourse went on in the Discord about this after I put the video up that I wanted to read out. Because one of the main points I was making in that video is that even though, yeah, he's putting out problematic stuff, it isn't actually his fault that he's so influential. Like, one podcast does have to be the most popular podcast in the world. And I think it's really, I said it in the video, but it's tough for us to start being like, well, he should be more responsible for what he's putting on when he's just having the, like, and I don't care about Joe Rogan. I don't listen to his podcast, but I think it's kind of weird that people want to, I don't know, that people are like calling Spotify to try and cancel him and get him off the platform in a way. Because you could kind of say this with anyone. You as an individual are responsible for your own actions and your own decisions. And if you are someone who is going to take medical advice from a podcast like Joe Rogan, then that's the kind of person you are. Like, I don't know how else to put that. And I think there are probably people who listen to this podcast maybe who are like influenced by what I say, but like every podcast I listen to, I take with a grain of salt. I don't always agree with everything that everyone says. And I sometimes think people who, all in all, I consider to be really good podcast hosts whose opinions I respect and really enjoy listening to. But sometimes I'm just listening to a podcast, I'm like, that's a stupid take. That's a terrible take. And I just move on from it and don't care about it and be like, I disagree with that person on that take. And I think anyone really, like here's an example that's not nearly as big, but it's an interesting example. Tom DeLonge, who is the lead singer, who was one of the lead singers in Blink-182, makes really good music that I've really enjoyed over my life. But he's also a conspiracy theorist who actively goes out seeking UFOs. He's like one of those UFO nuts, American UFO nut and conspiracy theorist, and like a bit of a nut job, to be honest. But I still love his music. And I'm influenced by his music, but I'm not influenced by his opinions in that way. And I think it's got to be the same way with everyone. Like, you can be influenced by a podcast, and if you're going to take everything that a podcast says to word and take it to heart and be like, yes, this is fact and this is real. Like, I don't know. I don't think it's this creator's responsibility to filter their content based on what a certain group of people want them to think. And if Joe Rogan wants to interview this scientist who has a different opinion on COVID, which I disagree with, but if he wants to interview him to hear his opinion, I don't think that that's the worst thing that he could do. And if you're getting your medical advice from that and you're taking his word from it, like, I just don't know. I just don't think that that's necessarily a good thing. And I think I spoke about this as well, but Neil Young removing his music from Spotify isn't a noble or valiant thing. He's a super wealthy dude. He can afford to take his music off Spotify. He also linked people to Amazon Music and said, if you want my music, go to Amazon Music. Amazon, a company that's as morally bankrupt as any other, well, probably the most morally bankrupt company in the world, this literal conglomerate with a billionaire owner. If you don't think people are being exploited at some point in Amazon's workflow, then you're an idiot. So Neil Young didn't really, to me, come across as some kind of protest martyr, noble savior for the people. He just looked like someone who can afford to take his music off Spotify because he was famous when CDs and physical music sales and musicians and artists and record labels were making millions. Whereas now it's much harder. Not everyone can take their music off Spotify, Neil Young. So I think it's a point of privilege that you're there. And yeah, I think it's just weird because, let's take someone like the Pope, who has a lot of controversial perspectives, right? But I guess he's protected by the fact that he's the Pope and it's his religion and he's allowed to say whatever he wants for his religious freedom. But like, no one's going, cancel the Pope, he should be out of the popedom. Well, I guess there's a lot of people against Catholic. I don't know if there's a perfect analogy here, but it's not Joe Rogan's fault that his podcast is the biggest podcast in the world. One of them has to be. And the contrary thought to this is there's a lot of podcasts that sit on the far left of politics that I look at, and they're all criticizing Rogan and saying, oh, he's guests, blah, blah, blah. Why would he have this guest on? Why would he have this guest on? But I think you could probably say the same for guests that those podcasts have, that people on radical sides of either political spectrum are bad for our discourse because they're not measured. And I think those people who have these, really woke podcasts on the left who have really radical guests on that say some pretty radical stuff are equally as bad. But of course, they don't see it in that prism because their world and their politics align with them and Joe Rogan's or whoever else's don't. And it's the same way on each side. And I just think it's pretty crazy. Some of the discourse going on in the Discord, Whitey said it's not his fault he's so influential, he's quoting me, is a key quote and a succinct statement here. I agree. It's odd that you're allowed to abide by your own rules to build an audience, but once you hit critical mass, those rules are suddenly out of your control. Rogan has grown because he's happy to entertain anybody as a guest. But Radio Timmy Dibs, welcome to the radio family, respectfully disagreed with that, saying just because it's not his fault that he's influential doesn't mean he can hide from the responsibility of it. He can have any guest on and have any discussions he wants. If it was someone pushing flat earth or a moon landing denier, that's okay. But when it's something that's important as public health about a pandemic, I believe he has a responsibility to not spread misinformation. Fair enough. I haven't listened to his podcast and I'm indifferent to him as a person. I also don't think he should get cancelled or dropped by Spotify, but he should do what he says he will and be better at it in the future. And I agree with that as well. And I agree with what Joe Rogan came out and said, which is that he's going to put disclaimers on podcasts that have controversial topics or potential COVID misinformation. And he also said he's going to try and have guests that counter each other out to get different opinions close by to each other on the podcast. And I think that's good. And I don't know what more he can do. And I also think it's a fruitless effort to try and convince Spotify to get rid of him. I also said this in the full video on YouTube, which you should check out. But, you know, in a sad way of what our capitalist society is business. And Joe Rogan's podcast is is probably the most profitable podcast in the world. It would be ridiculous for Joe Rogan, for Spotify to drop the Joe Rogan podcast, which they've invested $150 million in, right? Every year, I think they do, because of this. They're not going to. And that's a sad reflection on how the world works, but it's just not going to happen. That's a reality. I'd love to hear more thoughts on this. I know a lot of people have very, very different thoughts on this, and go check out that full video. I'm kind of regretting doing that as a video. I should have probably just done an extended discussion on this pod, but I think it's interesting territory that I think we're going to see more of. We saw something similar with Dave Chappelle's special, The Closer, on Netflix earlier this year, where people were going to the top Netflix to try and get them to remove the special. But again, they're not going to remove it because people like Dave Chappelle. And I'd be really interested to talk more about this next week. If people want to give me their thoughts, I'd be really keen, because this is a condensed version of what I said in that video. But I'd be really keen for people to let me know what they think. So yeah, definitely do that, please. I saw something pretty incredible on Instagram this week that I really wanted to talk about. One of my friends who has actually appeared on Harry Potter and the Boys in the past, Mikey D, absolute legendary dude. He's doing this amazing thing. I wanted to give him a shout out. He's Mikey D on Instagram, because he's so, if there's one thing you probably didn't know about me, it's that I love water parks. I love water slides. Love them. I love a water slide. My dream birthday is I book out Wet n Wild on the Gold Coast and bring all my friends, and there's no one else there. There's no lines, and I just get to go on all the water slides with all my friends. Mikey D has done this. He's doing this like campaign on his Instagram. He's gone to a water park, Adventure Park in Geelong. I've never been there because I always feel silly trying to suggest to my friends that we go to Adventure Park Geelong. I'd love to go. So it looks like a phenomenal water park that's probably like an hour drive away. Looks amazing. He's posted these photos of himself on water slides, these great photos that look like they could be marketing material. I'll put one on the screen for Adventure Park Geelong, right? He's loving it. And what he's done on Insta is he said, please tag Adventure Park Geelong in the comments to help me live my dream of being a water slide ambassador. And everyone's doing it. I've done it. He's getting some attention from Adventure Park Geelong. He's kind of doing what I did with Grilled. Actually, no, because I bullied Grilled into sponsoring me. He's just saying, I love Adventure Park Geelong and I want to go there and I want free tickets. I want to call him on the show because, you know, often I set goals on this show. For example, last year was get a pasta with Sammy Garlep, friend of the show. I want to set a goal on this show. I want to go to Adventure Park Geelong, the Waterslide Park in Geelong, with Mikey D, especially if he gets free tickets. I want to call him now, and I'm going to see what he thinks about this, if he'll have me along, and just see what he says. Hopefully he says yes. I want to see if he'll be happy to do it.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
Mikey, you're on the podcast. How are you?
Oh my god. Oh my god.
You're on the podcast.
I'm good.
Have I got you at a bad time?
No, there's never a bad time to be on Radio Mike's podcast.
Mikey, I've just been talking about what you've been doing with the Adventure Park Geelong stuff.
Yes, yeah, big deal.
I've just told the listeners that, and you can, there's one thing that you probably don't know about me. It's that I love water slides. I love them.
Okay, me too.
And I want to ask you, I want to come to Adventure Park Geelong with you. I want this to be a goal of my show. I've always wanted to go. I've just had no one to go with.
That's so sad and so beautiful and sweet. Mike, I would love to partake in an adventure to Adventure Park Geelong with you.
Oh, I'll play an applause sound effect. So do you think at some point this year we can go to Adventure Park Geelong together? And like, maybe if you get free tickets, but I'll shout it. I just want someone to go with.
Mike, at some point this month, we should get to Adventure Park Geelong together and ride the tornado.
Are you serious? This month?
And mate, as the official unofficial ambassador of Adventure Park Geelong, yes.
Well, that's what I was saying. You're kind of doing what I did with Grilled in a way, with Adventure Park Geelong.
Yeah, I've got big inspirations in my life, and you're definitely top 3 in terms of getting free things from companies.
All right, so can you answer this? Have Adventure Park Geelong reached out to you?
The only thing they've done so far is share my photos. So really, they're just milking me for my great content.
All right.
But I'll turn that into more.
We're going to work on it this week. I'm going to slide into Adventure Park Geelong's DMs and see if I can push them in the right direction. I don't know how much influence I have, but at some point this month or this year, depending on how our schedules go, we will go to Adventure Park Geelong together.
I think it's so feasible. We collectively have like 40,000 TikTok followers. That's a big deal.
All right, Mikey D, I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure the listeners are too. Good luck with it all, and thank you for accepting my date idea.
Thank you, RM. I'm so excited to go on this play date.
All right, awesome, mate. I'll speak to you soon.
Bye, mate.
See you, mate. Wow. Within this month, hopefully I'll be going to Adventure Park Geelong with Mikey D. I'm so excited. Water slides galore. It should be amazing. So stay tuned for that. That sounds like so much fun, guys. Before we go today, as always, we'll end the show with one of these bad boys. Psst, the plug. Side note, if anyone, I think there's a few people who live in Geelong who listen to this pod. Have you been to Adventure Park Geelong? Come with. Come with if you want. Geelong's like an hour drive from Melbourne, so I don't know why they have a water park there, but apparently they do. Also, I am going to Sydney on the 17th and 18th of February. I'll be in Sydney, and I actually wanted to say one of the long-running goals of this show is to go to the abandoned theme park Wonderland in Sydney, which I talked about on the show last year. Does anyone in Sydney know, can you just go there? Like, could I just get an Uber there and walk in? Or do you have to, like, jump a gate? Like, can you just go to that spot? Because I probably will do it when I'm there. But I don't know if you can just go. I actually don't know where it is or if you can just go there. Can someone from Sydney advise me a little bit on that? That would be really good. Of course, plugging here. Harry Potter and the Boys is the first plug, of course. Sammy Garlep on again for Chapter 2 this week. Chapter 2, a chapter that just sets things up a bit. That is the title of the chapter. Really funny chapter. Here's a great grab where one of the characters, Harold Biscuits, is trying to explain to his parents that he was essentially tortured by one of the professors at Hogwarts last year. Here's what happens. But this is Harold speaking to his parents, I think.
I'm telling you, Mr. Charger, the potions teacher, used me, and when I didn't murder people for him, he did this to me, said Harold. Yes, Harold, said Mr. Biscuits. and I wrote The Nutty Professor. Oh my god.
Yeah, great moment. Harry Potter and the Boys is going really well. Thank you to everyone for going over to that. Again, if you listen to both 20th Century Boy and Harry Potter and the Boys, $1 a month over on the Patreon would be awesome. Patreon.com/Radio Mike. Just for the time it takes to make them and pop them up there for you would be awesome. Of course, you can get these podcasts on YouTube for 20th Century Boy and watch them on there. Subscribe on the YouTube. I've done a bunch of videos that also go up on the Lovable Nerd podcast feed, which you can subscribe to on any podcast app. Go and check that out. I finally put up that Encanto review, which I thought Encanto was crap. And then I did a big YouTube video earlier this week about my thoughts on the Joe Rogan drama going on at Spotify with Neil Young removing his music catalog from Spotify because of Joe Rogan. If you want to hear about that, definitely go over to my YouTube to watch that video, or just go to the Lovable Nerd podcast feed where all the YouTube videos go up as MP3 rips. I would love for you to check those out. And The 100 with Andy Lee, Tuesdays 8:30, I think, on Channel 9, or catch up on the 9 Now streaming app. As well as that, radiomike.com.au/merch. Get your Don't Block the MDF stickers. Let's start a revolution here, guys. I want Pedestrian to pick this story up. And the new podcast Instagram, TCB Pod, at TCB Pod on Instagram, TikTok, radio.mike, Instagram, radio.mike, Twitter, it's Radio Mike, YouTube, Radio Mike, radiomikepod@gmail.com, and the phone number again is 1-800-438-353. Really love being back and can't wait to chat to you next week and hear from you during the week about any feedback you have on any of this stuff. Guys, I'll speak to you soon. My name's been Radio Mike. This podcast has been The Inside of My Mind. Don't block the MDF. I'm a very kind young man, and some of your older staff could learn a lot from me. Don't lie to me, because I'll see you. If I do see you, I'll see you in the Dream Factory tonight. Will Kennedy finish your farm project? Love you long time, and also short time. I'll see you later.